Joining us here today on the NewsX World. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio reiterated President Trump's support to Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán ahead of the April elections. Rubio said the US is ready to provide financial help if Hungary faces difficulties, stressing that Trump wants Orbán to succeed. This follows an earlier visit by Orbán to the White House, where Trump offered financial protection. Rubio also talked about the strong relationship between the US and Hungary, especially in energy and business. Orbán thanked Trump, calling the current US-Hungary ties a new golden age. Listen in.
President Trump is deeply committed to your success because your success is our success. Because this relationship we have here in Central Europe through you is so essential and vital for our national interests.
We are now being joined by Ross Feingold, who's a political analyst, joining us from Taiwan. Thank you so much for joining us here today on NewsX World. How might stronger US-Hungary ties impact EU coercion on issues like Ukraine? We know Ukraine and Hungary don't have a very great relationship right now, within energy sanctions and democratic standards.
From the perspective of the Trump administration, which is obviously a critic of the European Union, that's very well known. It was in the first Trump administration. It is in the second Trump administration. It serves the Trump administration's goals with regard to Europe, that there are countries and leaders in Europe that are very critical of the European Union. So the Europeans can't say, well, we all disagree with President Trump and we're united or unanimous in that regard, because it's simply not true. There are leaders like Hungary's Orbán who disagree with the European Union policies across a number of issues. They are critics of the bureaucracy in Brussels. And those views are also very well known, and they're very outspoken about that. So from President Trump's perspective, or Vice President Vance, or Secretary of State Rubio, when they criticize the European Union, they know that there are some leaders like Orbán who will agree with them.
And could US support for Orbán influence the outcome of Hungary's April elections, and would that cause implications for the EU?
That's a really interesting question. We simply don't know. We could look at different polls and the likelihood that Orbán will lead his coalition to victory again. If he does, if he's successful, then sure, it could be that voters felt that it's important to have the United States and the current government of the United States, President Trump, on their side, and that's why they decide to return this group to power. If they should lose and the opposition should win, then we'll be talking about this on NewsX and saying that President Trump's support for Orbán backfired. It didn't help. So it's definitely something to watch. The support of President Trump has been a factor in multiple elections around the world. It's helped people get elected. Right of center conservative candidates have successfully been elected with the outspoken support of President Trump. So it could very well be a factor in Orbán returning to power. And if he does return to power, then again, we'll be in the same situation where we are now, where there is a leader in Europe who is very outspoken in his criticism of the European Union.
And what does Trump's backing of Orbán signal about US foreign policy priorities in Europe?
Well, we know what some of those priorities are. One, it's to reach an agreement between Ukraine and Russia, which involves the parameters that are publicly known, and most notably that Ukraine would have to agree to a certain amount of its territory being occupied by Russia. And Hungary is not going to criticize those parameters, whereas other European countries have criticized those parameters. So the most pressing issue is probably Ukraine-Russia, and now the United States has a leader in Hungary who agrees with the Trump administration negotiating approach. Another issue is criticism of immigration, and specifically immigration from Muslim, Middle Eastern countries or African countries. And Orbán's views on that issue are very similar to the Trump administration's issues. And the Trump administration has been willing to criticize the European Union about that. And then another issue is green energy. Again, it's another issue where the Trump administration's views and President Trump's views, very well known. Those views clash with the European Union and the EU headquarters in Brussels and a number of EU policies in that regard. And you have a leader who's willing to say that I want to use more oil and coal. I don't want to use or be forced to shift to renewables the way many European Union members want to do so. And that's another issue where the Trump administration disagrees with the European Union, but there's alignment between Orbán and the Trump administration.
Thank you, Ross. Don't go too far, as we will be back with you very shortly. Former US Secretary of State